Feel free
All
to.
right. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to my talk. I'm excited you're all here, and I'm eager to share my research on anti-ableist practices in teaching and teacher education. So for today, 3 learning objectives. By the end of today's session, you'll be able to define anti-ableist practices. You'll be able to explain their importance. You'll be able to describe the research on factors that influence how teachers engage in anti-ableist practices. And finally, you'll be able to explain the role that teacher education programs can play in preparing teachers to effectively implement anti-ableist practices. Throughout the presentation, if you have an urgent question, something you want immediate clarification on, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, I'll definitely have time for questions at the end. So thank you, Leslie, for that great introduction. A little bit about me. Here's a photo of my institution, Seton University in South Orange, New Jersey, where I'm currently an assistant professor in the Department of Educational Studies. Prior to joining the faculty at Seton, I started my career as a special education teacher. I was an in-class support teacher in a 2nd grade classroom before I went on to pursue my PhD. The research I'm going to share today is inspired by my teaching at the elementary and at the college level, and it focuses on how teachers in both K-12 and higher education settings address disability with their students. So in this talk, I'm going to first describe the problem my research centers on, which is, in short, that disability is often not addressed in meaningful ways in the classroom. Then I'm going to talk about recent research I've done in this area, particularly related to K-12 teachers and teacher educators in post-secondary settings. And then finally, I'm going to end with discussions of next steps, both for research and practice. So I want you to think for a moment. Have you ever been with a child who loudly asked a question about someone's disability? For me, with my kids, it's always in the food store for some reason. How did you or the adults around you respond? Many of us have been in situations where we've been with young children who've said something that we perceive as somewhat embarrassing at top volume. So for example, when out shopping, a 4-year-old might shout, "Why is that man in a wheelchair?" Or "What's wrong with that lady?" Or "How come they get to bring their puppy?" pointing at a service dog. These questions are legitimate. These moments teach us that children notice difference early on, and how we respond in these moments shapes kids' understanding of disability. And silence sends a message. When these situations come up, adults often ignore children, or we shush them, or we tell them, "Be quiet, not now." And this response is usually well-intentioned. It's aiming to avoid embarrassment on the part of both the parent and the person or puppy being pointed at. However, this silence can uphold the idea that conversations about differences are taboo in some way. It can perpetuate bias and fear, and it can teach children that some forms of difference are less desirable and leave them with the feeling that maybe disability is a negative thing. As kids get older, they spend more and more time in formal school settings. And so teachers need to be prepared to have conversations about disability to avoid students forming negative perceptions of disability. These negative perceptions of disability are rooted in ableism. So ableism is a system of discrimination and exclusion. It oppresses people who have disabilities. Importantly, ableism is beyond just individual prejudices that people may hold. It's an entire system of exclusion. And we can look at examples both historical and in the modern day. In the United States, individuals with disabilities were not guaranteed a free and appropriate public education until 1975. But ableism isn't a thing of the past. It occurs when people assume incompetence based on someone's appearance or diagnosis. It occurs when playgrounds don't have accessible features, or when they have just 1 or 2 accessible features, like just a ramp or 1 accessible swing is not a fully accessible playground. It occurs when buildings or businesses are inaccessible, built without ramps or accessible bathrooms. It occurs when others look at a person using a disability parking placard skeptically, questioning whether they really have a disability. And it occurs when captions are missing on videos or at events, or when people with disabilities are left out of school curricula, which is what I'm going to focus on today. In the work I'll discuss today, I'm drawing on an area of research called disability studies in education. And disability studies in education, or DSE, recognizes disability as a historical, social, cultural, political, and economic issue. It challenges deficit-oriented views of disability as related to education. Disability studies in education challenges the medical model of disability, which is the idea that disability is a condition requiring intervention and that it's the responsibility of individuals with disabilities to adapt to society. In contrast, DSE ascribes to what we call the social model of disability. The social model highlights the ways that individuals with disabilities are excluded from society because of external, not internal factors. The social model of disability, it doesn't deny that disability exists, but it does differentiate between disability and impairment. Impairments result in functional differences, the inability to walk or the inability to see. But the term disability is capturing the social ramifications that a disabled individual experiences because of those functional differences. So they might experience segregated educational opportunities, difficulty navigating public spaces, etc. Much of the world, including most schools operate using more of a medical model of disability. That is the assumption that we want to fix disability. Disability studies in education challenges this, asking what if in some cases the problem is how schools are structured? One note before I go further is you'll hear me alternating between person first and disability identity first language in alignment with the field of disability studies in education, which posits that both are valued ways that some people with disabilities prefer to be referred to. So take a minute and think back. Think about your time in school. I want you to just reflect, what messages did you hear, either explicitly or implicitly about disability? How did teachers talk about disability? Did your textbooks talk about disability? Chances are you didn't hear much. Maybe you read of Mice and Men. That has a character with a disability in it. Or maybe you learned about some individuals with disabilities. FDR and Helen Keller are two that often have come up in my research that people remember learning about. Some adults also report having learned about disability in the context of biology as well. So normally, people with Down syndrome have one extra chromosome. It's usually a little example when you're learning about genetics and biology. When you did hear about disability as you grew up, it may have been described using disability rhetoric. Disability rhetoric refers to the ways in which language, stories, and cultural narratives reinforce ableist thinking. And two common forms of disability rhetoric are the sentimental and the wondrous. So sentimental rhetoric views disability as a tragedy, so it's so sad. Whereas wondrous rhetoric uses disability as a source of inspiration. So you may have seen posters with an individual with a disability that say, if he can do it, what's your excuse? Teachers, like all people, can internalize these narratives, which then in turn will shape how they think about, talk about, and teach about disability to their students. One alternative to ableist rhetoric that occurs probably most commonly in classrooms is actually silence. So some teachers will make kind of generic statements like, we're all the same. And these statements, they appear on the surface inclusive, but in actuality, they end up discounting the experiences of individuals with disabilities. And they prevent substantive discussion about disability as a form of diversity. Mara Seton is a disability researcher from Syracuse University, and she uses the term invisibility to explain this process of disability erasure. Invisibility can be likened to conversations regarding race and color blindness. So color blindness is the act of not seeing color or silencing discussions about race, and it can lead children into believing that, oh, racism isn't a big concern in society, so we don't need to do anything to fix it. As with race and color blindness, children can be taught the discourse of invisibility at a young age. And even really well-intended inclusive spaces can unintentionally reinforce invisibility. If children aren't given opportunities to recognize disability, they run the risk of either internalizing disability stereotypes, believing that talking about disability is not appropriate, and they leave K-12 education unprepared to interrupt ableism, right? When they see it, they don't really have a framework for what to do about it. Classrooms that are premised on invisibility are problematic because they view the minimization of disability as a positive thing. And that in turn discourages disability-related conversation. So you may have heard the saying, the best inclusion classroom is one where you can't tell who is disabled and who isn't. And on the one hand, you can kind of understand why people say that. But then when you think about it, that does kind of also erase disability as well. So here in this picture, I just have some examples of disability invisibility in the classroom. We might have a teacher who feels unprepared or unsure of how to talk about disability. When talking about role models, disabled role models are rarely discussed or present. Or when visitors come into the classroom, there are rarely visitors with disabilities sharing about themselves. They might highlight race and gender and culture in history and literature, but rarely talk about disability. And students might be discouraged from talking about disability. And this could be indirectly. Maybe when they do ask about it, the teacher isn't really responsive and that kind of indirectly discourages them. Or the teacher could just make a comment like, oh, that's not nice, we don't talk about that. And that discourages them from talking about it as well. So the question is, if this is the problem, what can we do about this? Anti-ableist practices are one answer. And anti-ableist practices aim to promote the idea that human variation is normal and that kids should question stereotypes related to disability and should foster a deeper understanding of disability rights and awareness. And so there's a lot of different anti-ableist practices we could do in school. Teachers could self-reflect on the role that disability plays in their lives and in their communities. We can look to the curriculum. When we talk about civil rights movements, do we talk about the disability rights movements, or do we just focus on different civil rights movements? We can look at the environment. We can look at our classroom posters and say, are they inclusive of people with disabilities? We can look at our classroom libraries, or in the case of early childhood settings, the toys that are present, right? Are there dolls with wheelchairs or who use crutches? Are there play sets with accessible features like ramps? And finally, we can look to our language and how we discuss disability. So that brings us to the next slide, where I actually want to show an example of anti-ableist discussion versus just disability discussion in general. So here's a picture from one of my favorite children's books. It's called We Move Together, and it's great for just so many different ages. You can use it with little kids. I've read it to my pre-service teachers and they really enjoy it. It's a really nice celebration of all different people, and it's the type of book where anyone could have an entry point to it. If we look at this scene, it says, sometimes when we're together, we get stopped in our tracks, like when all the fun and flavors of ice cream are just one step out of reach. And you'll see in this picture, there's an ice cream shop, but this family can't go in. As a teacher, there's two ways I can approach the problem in this scene. The first way is more aligned with the medical model of disability. Teachers could talk with students and they can acknowledge the person's using a scooter, therefore they can't get into the ice cream store because there's a step. And we can talk to children about how the characters look sad and how would you feel if you couldn't get ice cream. Our aim here would be primarily to develop empathy in children. Another way to look at this scene, though, is to use anti-ableist disability discussion. We can turn our attention to the inaccessible architecture of the ice cream shop. The ice cream shop was designed and built with the expectation that all customers could climb stairs. It wasn't made to welcome everyone, and that means that people who can't climb stairs are left out. This is an example of ableism, and we can point this out to children, and we can empower them to brainstorm changes that could be made. They could consider a ramp, or maybe a window outside that people could walk up to if a ramp isn't possible for some reason. But we could let kids brainstorm these solutions and actually think about how can we allow everybody access to the ice cream shop. Anti-ableist disability discussion is different from disability discussion in general. So a teacher could engage in disability discussion in general when we ask a student, okay, do you get extended time on this test? Or in biology when talking about individual differences. Anti-ableist disability discussion, though, takes it a step further, and it involves students in recognizing an accessible local playground and maybe writing a persuasive essay describing why and how it should be improved. Both of these types of discussions are important for all students with and without disabilities. While both disability discussion in general and anti-ableist disability discussion have a place in the classroom, only anti-ableist disability discussion attempts to actually challenge ableist beliefs about disability. So earlier, we talked about a child who loudly asked a question about disability and how adults often silence these moments out of discomfort. If we think about this on a larger scale, what happens when teachers also avoid these conversations in the classroom? Students might internalize that disability isn't something we talk about. They might reinforce harmful stereotypes. I recently read a paper where children were looking at a picture of other children with hearing aids, and they actually assumed that they were earplugs that the person had put in, and that's why they couldn't hear, not that they were meant to help the child hear. So if no one steps in to correct these misconceptions, kids are going to form these stereotypes or these misconceptions, and they're never going to get fixed. Students can end up seeing disability as a problem to be fixed, not as just a natural part of human diversity. And if we only highlight disabled people as inspirational, it sends the implicit message that disabled people exist for the benefit to inspire non-disabled people. By using anti-ableist disability discussion, students leave classrooms able to internalize disability as a natural part of diversity and potentially intervene later on if they see ableism. So now I want to transition to what do we know? What have I uncovered in my research about anti-ableist practices in the classroom? Rather than taking you study by study by study, I feel like that sometimes gets a little tedious. I decided to break it into 4 key themes that have emerged from my research over the past few years. These themes are that many teachers avoid and cite barriers to disability discussions. When teachers do discuss disability, they're often doing so in more general ways, not in anti-ableist ways. Pre-service teachers, so those are generally college students who are working to become teachers, they say that their experience with disability-related discussion is limited heading into college. And teacher training matters, but teacher educators, when we've interviewed and surveyed them, they actually say they need additional support in this area too. So the first theme, many teachers avoid and cite barriers to disability discussion. As a first look, my collaborators and I wanted to get a sense of what's currently happening in classrooms. We wondered if teachers discuss disability at all. And so we conducted a study. It was an online survey of 256 pre-K to 12 teachers. And what we were looking at was we wanted to see the extent to which they engage in any sort of disability discussion. 71.9% do describe discussing disability with their students. As I'll discuss in a few slides, though, this didn't necessarily mean they were doing so in anti-ableist ways. Most of the time, it ended up they were doing so in the context of students' own learning needs. So, oh, you have an accommodation, you can have this calculator. It wasn't necessarily in anti-ableist ways. We asked teachers whether they felt comfortable discussing disability in their classroom, and some teachers were, but some teachers weren't. Comfort level was positively correlated to discussion frequency. That is, teachers with a higher degree of comfort discuss disability more frequently. When it comes to discussing disability in the classroom, we found that there were a number of factors that could either support or hinder these conversations. And so I broke them down into both internal factors and external factors. Internal factors are more personal to an individual, whereas external factors are kind of shaped by the broader institutional or school environment. So first, let's take a look at the internal or personal facilitators. These are personal qualities or experiences that make it easier for teachers to engage in disability discussions. If someone feels comfortable talking about disability, if they're familiar with disability-related language, or if they have a personal connection, maybe a family member or a close friend, or they themselves belong to the disability community, they were more likely to navigate disability conversations with confidence. On the flip side, there are also internal obstacles, factors that make someone hesitant to engage in anti-ableist or any disability discussion. Some people may feel unsure or about how to even begin the conversation, or they reported worrying about saying the wrong thing or offending someone. Nearly half of teachers in our study selected this, that they were afraid of offending somebody with a disability. Others might just feel a general discomfort with the topic, or they may be hesitant to do so because it could lead to an uncomfortable conversation in their classroom. We followed up this study with interviews, and the theme that came out from those interviews was that, what do I do if I have a child with that disability in my class? Like, will they feel like I'm calling them out? And I think many educators have confidentiality like really ingrained in them as something that's important when dealing with students with disabilities. And so I think that's kind of a conflict they were wrestling with. Beyond personal factors, there's also external supports that can make a big difference. If teachers have curricular flexibility, they're more likely to discuss disability. So this means that they have control over what they can teach. They have more room to incorporate disability-related content. If they felt like they had support from administrators or parents, they were also more likely to feel empowered to engage in these discussions. It also helps when the topic naturally fits into the curriculum and makes it relevant to what's already been taught. So something we found was that social studies and language arts teachers, they tended to be a little more, see it as more relevant to their subject areas, whereas math teachers maybe didn't quite see the connection. There's connections they could make, they just didn't necessarily see those connections for how they could incorporate this in their classroom. There's also institutional obstacles, which can make these discussions more difficult. The biggest challenge that came up is time. And I think anyone who's ever taught knows time is your biggest barrier. Teachers feel so much pressure to cover so much and to navigate so many different needs in their classroom. And as a result, disability-related discussions might not seem like a priority. It might not seem like something they have time for, or it might just seem like one more thing to fit in. A lack of resources, such as quality teaching materials or training, can also be a barrier. And in terms of, materials on teaching about the contributions of people with disabilities or having conversations about disability, there's really not much out there for teachers. You have to really like dig to find some of these things. Finally, as I said before, if disability isn't seen as relevant to the curriculum, it might not be incorporated at all. So understanding these facilitators and obstacles can help us think critically about how we can better support meaningful conversations about disability in educational spaces. Moving on to our second theme, we found that when teachers did discuss disability, it often wasn't in anti-ableist ways. So on the one hand, it was good they were discussing it, but it wasn't really taking it a step further to encourage kids to be able to confront or disrupt ableism. Though 72% of participants did describe discussing disability with their students, 81% of those teachers discussed disability in relation to students' learning needs. For example, whether a student got extended time, whether they could use a calculator, whether they needed a quiet testing space, mostly accommodations in the classroom. By comparison, about 60% of teachers who discussed disability held those conversations when disability was present in the literature or the curriculum. We don't know much from this particular study about the nature of these discussions, whether they were whether they're just pointing out the presence of a disabled individual, or whether they were doing something a little more deeper than that. So we don't really have that information. For the next study, I took a look at my own state. So New Jersey provides a really interesting case study for this type of work. The New Jersey Department of Education actually mandated that public schools teach about the political, social, and economic contributions of individuals with disabilities beginning in the 2020 to 2021 school year. Now, there was a lot going on in 2020. So implementation of this was a little slow to start. In 2023, we gave an online survey to New Jersey social studies teachers to see how this implementation was going. Promisingly, nearly 9 in 10 teachers indicated comfort with disability discussion. So like 90% of teachers said, I'm comfortable with this. But 1 in 4 teachers were completely unaware of this mandate, which I think kind of signifies the priority it was given by districts and, enrolling it out. Nearly half of teachers surveyed reported discussing disability never or rarely. When I did this study, I focused specifically on social studies teachers with the thought that if we're going to be teaching about the contributions of individuals, social studies seems like a great place to start. I wanted to get a sense of, okay, this seems like it could be the easiest place to put this. So let's start there. When teachers did discuss disability, they often didn't do so in ways that were in alignment with the mandate. So recall that the mandate actually asked teachers to teach about the contributions of individuals with disabilities. What we learned was that when teachers did bring up disability, it was often discussed in ways that focus on the negative ways disabled individuals were treated throughout history. So for example, institutionalization or the Holocaust. And it's of course necessary to teach about these atrocities. We can't gloss over the bad parts of history, but if we only teach about those and we don't teach about stories where people with disabilities had agency and made contributions and engaged in activism, what we risk doing is encouraging deficit thinking and presenting disabled people as only being able to experience exclusion or suffering or deserving of pity. Disability advocates were mentioned very infrequently or altogether absent from discussion. Approximately 1/3 of teachers who responded did discuss the disability rights movement. That's a pretty low percentage considering most of these people were teaching history where this likely could have been embedded. Only 41% of teachers actually did, do what the law mandated, which was discussing the contributions of individuals with disabilities. So this tells us there's a lot of work still to do here. Moving on to theme 3, the next place we took our research was we wanted to see, okay, so teachers in schools, they're having a hard time grappling with this, even when they're social studies teachers, and it should be somewhat easier for them to make these connections, and it's mandated by a state Department of Education, still having a hard time. So we thought, okay, let's look at pre-service teachers. Let's look at college students who are trying to become teachers, who have just gone through the K-12 system, and see what they say about this. We had 32 pre-service teachers enroll in this study, and it was part of their enrollment in one of 3 sections of a 200-level special education course. Participants did a lot of things as part of this study. They completed an optional demographic survey. They did an assignment related to disability. But finally, we did an audio recorded structured debrief where we got to really hear their thoughts on this. We found that pre-service teachers uniformly noted that they had really limited experience with disability during their K-12 schooling. And these were students who had just gone through K-12. So this wasn't, practicing teachers reflecting on 20 years ago what they learned in school. This was, for some of them, it was 2 years ago what they had learned in school. One pre-service teacher said, honestly, we never really discussed disabilities or had any exposure to anyone with a disability. It was never something we learned about and never something we saw in school. I had never heard of an inclusive classroom until I joined the education program in college. Several pre-service teachers were actually frustrated about this, and they expressed that in the structured debrief. They felt like they were really missed opportunities to talk about disability constructively. One pre-service teacher felt that it kind of fueled disability stigma. She said, by not educating students about disabilities, many more stereotypes regarding disabilities developed because we weren't given facts or information to form our own opinions. Some pre-service teachers said when disability was actually present in the classroom text, their K-12 teachers didn't really address it. And the book Of Mice and Men came up a lot when they talked about this. Many of them had read Of Mice and Men, And all they knew was one of the characters had a disability, but they didn't really talk about that in any more detail other than just he was there with a disability. And let's talk about symbolism and plot and other points. In cases where pre-service teachers did discuss disability, they reported that it had happened in health and science courses. As one student described an anatomy class, she said, my teacher only talked about disability for a brief moment when she was discussing that children are born with an extra chromosome and how that causes Down syndrome. So they're coming to college with this really medicalized view of disability. And yet in just 4 years, they need to be able to teach children they need to be able to lead conversations about disability with young children. It turned out that pre-service teachers really appreciated activities that humanized disability and went beyond their textbook. And they were pretty vocal that they really wanted explicit instruction about how to talk about disability in their future classrooms. It was very much that, they said, as I learn more about disabilities, I get more comfortable, but I think there's always more to learn. And they were really, really, really worried about coming across as disrespectful or offensive. So in some ways, they actually weren't that unlike the in-service teachers we had studied, right? They said, when I am discussing disabilities with a family member of someone who has a disability, I'm always worried I'll say something that will insult them. So this is pointing to the need of some training. We asked them to design a classroom activity explicitly addressing disability. So not teaching kids with disabilities, which many of them are comfortable with, but actually talking about disability. And here I have a framework by Seton, where she says there's kind of like this is a trajectory. So we can go from, not really focusing on disability, focusing on feelings and tolerance and really avoiding disability on one end of the spectrum. And on the other end of the spectrum, we could have teachers who really notice names and engage with disability and points out barriers and solutions. In the middle, we have teachers who kind of have these really generic responses like, oh, remember the golden rule, we're all the same, treat others the way you want to be treated. And we found that when these pre-service teachers did design classroom activities addressing disability, most of their activities were over here, towards the left side of this trajectory. Many of them did not notice, name, or engage with disability. So from that, it's clear there's work to be done. We have in-service teachers who are uncomfortable talking about disability, and we have pre-service teachers who are uncomfortable talking about disability and report not having this experience in their own K-12 experience. So we want to look at teacher training. And what we found was that teacher training actually really matters. So our quantitative work characterizing the nature of disability discussions in classrooms led us to wonder, okay, so we have a lot of teachers. What determines whether a teacher will approach disability in anti-ableist ways? And so what we did is we conducted 1-hour in-depth interviews with 50 in-service teachers. And we wanted to specifically focus on their training related to disability. And so this training would mainly presumably occur in teacher preparation programs, either at the undergraduate or the graduate level. Teachers described that their training was primarily focused on compliance and fixing disability. And in some cases, I'm not saying that is a bad thing, right? Like if we have a child with dyslexia, we know that explicit phonics and multisensory instruction is going to help that child. Of course, we should do that. But the problem was that most of this training was focusing on information related to complying with legal requirements, IEPs, 504 plans. And while all of that stuff is important, they rarely discussed how to talk about disability with students. It was very compliance focused. We found that teachers we were able to determine, okay, which teachers view disability through the social model lens and which view it through more of a medical model lens. And we found that teachers who saw disability through the social model lens were more likely to talk about it in ways that challenge ableism. Teachers were more likely to adopt a social model perspective if they had learned about it during their teacher training, or if they had significant personal experience with disability. This could mean they were disabled themselves, they had a disabled child, they had a close family member or friend with disability. But just saying they believed in the social model wasn't enough. Only the teachers who had formal training in their teacher education programs in the social model of disability were the ones having anti-ableist conversations in their classrooms. So this tells us that if we want teachers who engage in anti-ableist practices, one place to start is teacher education. This seems like a really good place where if we can provide this social model training and provide some explicit instruction, we could probably make a meaningful difference in terms of teachers that are graduating from these programs and going out to work with children. In a recent qualitative study, though, I decided to interview special education teacher educator faculty. So basically, my thought there was, who out of all teacher education faculty at universities, in my mind, special education teacher faculty would be more comfortable talking about disability. And so I was interested in like kind of what they thought about this anti-ableist discussion. And actually, 4 out of the 5 special education teacher educators I interviewed had very little training in teaching about disability. They were very trained in how to teach children with disabilities and how to teach pre-service teachers how to teach children with disabilities, but they had no training in how to actually talk about disability. 3 out of the 5 of them admitted they felt really uncomfortable teaching their pre-service teachers how to engage in these discussions because they weren't sure how to engage in them either. All 5 said they wanted more training and resources to better support pre-service teachers. And so some things they said. Videos of experts in the field engaging their students in these discussions, like models, would be really awesome. I think that that would be helpful for me as an instructor to know what that looks like. Or I would love to have somebody come and tell me, this is how you talk about it. This is how you do disability awareness in schools. So it's clear there's a lot to be done, both in terms of training teacher educators, in terms of training current teachers, and in terms of training pre-service teachers. So some implications of this. For classrooms to be fully inclusive and for disability to be valued as a minoritized identity, teachers need to receive training grounded in the social model of disability. But much work remains because many schools are emphasizing compliance and framing disability through a medicalized lens, reinforcing the idea that it's something to fix. We can keep the training on the compliance, that's so important, and we can keep the training on techniques for teaching students with disabilities, but we need to add the social model perspective as well. So I'm not calling for removing any of this. I'm calling for more of an addition to teacher education. Teacher educators can likely benefit from collaboration, both within their institutions and beyond their institutions, to integrate anti-ableist instruction across all coursework. Too often, disability is seen as the responsibility of special educators alone. Pretty much anything with disability is just handed to the special education teachers to deal with. And while special education teachers and faculty play a critical role in supporting students with disabilities, all teachers need to share the responsibility of ensuring that disability is recognized as an aspect of diversity. This isn't just a special education thing. This is good for all students to learn this. A key finding from my research is the need for professional development. Both pre-service and in-service teachers require more training in this area. Many teachers in our studies, importantly, I didn't have the experience across all these studies of teachers saying they didn't want to do this. Most people seem to value that teaching about disability would be a good thing. Teaching about the contributions of disabled individuals would be a good thing, but they lack the necessary education or support. So professional development that provides actionable classroom-ready resources is likely to be the most effective. And that leads us to the next implication, which is the development of curricular materials. Although some resources exist, those that highlight the contributions of people with disabilities, guide discussions on disability in the classroom, or provide disability history are often difficult to find and limited in scope. There's more out there on kind of the standard like go-tos, FDR, Helen Keller. There's a few people that tend to come up, but there's not much for other disability activists or other disabled people who have made contributions throughout history. Many of these are also not aligned with state standards. So that would be one way to improve these resources, is to actually align them with state standards so it's easier for teachers to use right away. Across all of these studies, teachers expressed a strong interest in high quality, standards aligned, ready to use resources. It was pretty much, if these things would exist, I would use them. Finally, a great avenue for future research would be to examine real classroom practices. So much of this work does rely on teacher self-report, which is a limitation. A great next step, and something I'm looking into doing, is observational research in classrooms, which would give us good insight into what anti-ableist teaching would look like in practice and what strategies are most effective. So before I wrap up and ask for questions, I just wanted to thank, I have the most amazing collaborators, Krista Bialka, Irene Can, Sarah Wong. They're amazing. I also want to acknowledge I've had a great group of elementary and special education students who have been working with me on this research over the past few semesters. And finally, I'd like to thank my institution for internal funding that I've been provided for this research. Thank you so much for listening. I'd love to hear if you have any questions or thoughts.
I guess I have one question.
Yeah, thank you.
Something I always sort of brush up against sometimes is the both validating, educating the like, hey, we need to talk about disabled experiences generally speaking, not generally speaking, but like specifically, right? While also sort of holding in the other hand at the same time that like everybody has access needs and we need to sort of conduct our spaces, whether classroom or otherwise, in ways that validate that like, and actually might normalize even the idea that like disabled access needs aren't that much different than the access needs that everybody has and are just more readily attended to. But I think sometimes holding that sometimes has a sort of a nullifying effect, right? Or it can, right? To be like everybody has access needs, but also like disabled experiences are specific and distinct from folks whose access needs are more readily met. I'm curious about from an constructing an education space perspective, how to potentially balance those two things, or if there's anything in your experiences or research that might gesture towards this.
Yeah, I think that's a tough thing, right? Like, because ideally by teaching about the contributions of people with disability, we are doing just that, like, right? We're normalizing disability. We're making it not something that kids are uncomfortable talking about or shying away from. So I think there is a balance. I do think though, like even thinking about how, yeah, everybody has access needs, but let's talk about people who fought for support so we could have those and to like normalize conversations about that, right? Like, so we could talk about Judy Heumann and Bradley Lomax and other disabled activists that often aren't being mentioned in the curriculum, and then lead that to the discussion of, yes, people with disability have access needs, but also we all have needs, and kind of bridge the conversation that way.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So we had some comments in the chat. Did anyone else have any questions? Thank you so much, Nicole.
Thank you. It was great to be here. I was happy to share.
Yes, as we're finishing up, do remember Leslie put in, she had the skedaddle for class, but there is a link for the session evaluation if you wouldn't mind going and taking that. It doesn't take too long. And then I also had, I know I have Heather's name down that put in for the attendance certificates. If anyone needs one of those attendance certificates, you can also email after, but if you would want to put in the chat now, so that's recorded, and so that those can be gotten to you once we finish, and those are prepared, please make sure you do that. Thank you, Stephanie. All right. Otherwise, if no one has anything, thank you all so much. Nicole, thank you again. This was fantastic.
Thank you.
Everyone have a fantastic day.